Hello, hello. Welcome back to Conscious Evolution. I'm your host, AJ. Welcome back. This is going to be Seth Speaks Chapter 1, Part 2. I'm going to pick up right where we left off from Part 1. So if you're coming into this and you haven't seen Part 1 yet, then you should probably go watch Part 1. All right. I'm just going to get right on into it here, guys. Tired. I want to go to bed. And the kids are still awake. So, well, one of them is. They're not feeling well either, so they're cranky pants. Excuse me.
Holy Spirit, please give me a quick reading here. What do you see happening with the twins? What do you see happening?
Who is this?
Okay, what is the divine feminine thinking? And what is the divine masculine thinking?
Just keep swimming 11-11.
Quick one. I might have to erase that other one. It is what it is, guys.
She's doing a reading. I was listening to a little bit of it before I turned the camera on here, and she was mentioning something about healing, mastering healing, and it was someone with dark hair, dark eyes. And that just kind of took me back a second, like, is spirit like talking to her, telling about me? Like, I feel like I'm being told the same thing over and over again, and I'm just so damn stubborn that haven't fully stepped into my power and taken the leap of faith that I need to take, and I get closer and closer every day, but there's just loose ends I need to tie up with work and a few other things, just little details that you could probably figure it out without it, but it'd just be a little easier. But then it also means suffering for a little longer. But this is the battle in my mind. Anyways, let's get right into it. All right. Seth speaks on the eternal validity of the soul. Chapter 1, Part 2. Okay, so Jane left trance rather easily, although it had been a good one. She was quite surprised that so much time had passed. She was also much relieved that Seth had started the book, while keeping her well under. She was also much relieved that Seth had started the book while keeping her well under. Oh, he's smart, she laughed. Somebody's pretty tricky. Seth resumed his book at 10:34. I am primarily a teacher, but I have not been a man of letters per se. I am primarily a personality with a message. You create the world that you know. You have been given perhaps the most awesome gift of all, the ability to project your thoughts outward into physical form. The gift brings a responsibility, and many of you are tempted to congratulate yourselves on the successes of your lives and blame God, fate, and society for your failures. In like manner, mankind has a tendency to project his own guilt and his own errors upon a Father God image, who it seems must grow weary of so many complaints. That's funny. The fact is that each of you creates your own physical reality, and en masse, you create both the glories and the terrors that exist within your earthly experience. Until you realize that you are the creators, you will refuse to accept this responsibility. Let's go to this side now. I'm getting real close to the camera. I hope this is my good side. My nose is a little crooked, can you tell? I got hit really hard in the face when I was young. Didn't even see it coming. Just, I don't know where that came from. Anyways, that's why my nose is crooked. All right. So you refuse to accept this responsibility, nor can you blame a devil for the world's misfortunes. You have grown sophisticated enough to realize that the devil is a projection of your own psyche, but you have not grown wise enough to learn how to use your creativity constructively. I don't like holding the book like this. It's not. Anyways. You've grown sophisticated enough to realize that the devil is a projection of your own psyche, but you have not grown wise enough to learn how to use your creativity constructively. Most of my readers are familiar with the term muscle bound. As a species, you have grown ego bound instead, held in a spiritual rigidity with the intuitive portions of the self either denied or distorted beyond any recognition. The hour is growing late. Both of my friends must get up early in the morning. Rupert is working on 2 books of his own and must get his sleep. Before I end this session, I ask you to imagine our setting, for Rupert has told me that the writer must be careful to set the scene humorously. I wonder if that means like they're laughing or it was funny. I speak through Rupert twice a week on Mondays and Wednesdays in the same large living room. The lights are always lit. This evening it is enjoyable for me to look out through Rupert's eyes at the wintry corner beyond. Physical reality has always been refreshing to me, and through Rupert's cooperation and as I write this book, I see that I was correct in appreciating its unique charms. There is one other character to be mentioned here, Willie, the cat, a beloved monster who is now sleeping. Willie was snoring actually, on top of the old-fashioned TV set. His position put him just behind the back of Jane's head as she sat in her rocker. That was Mr. Butt's note. The nature of animal consciousness in itself is a highly interesting subject, and one that we will later consider. The cat is aware of my presence and has on several occasions reacted rather noticeably to it. In this book, I hope to show the constant interactions that occur between all units of consciousness, the communication that leaps beyond the barriers of species, and in some of these discussions, we will use Willie as a case in point. You may take a break or end the session if you prefer. My heartiest wishes to you both. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm enjoying it rather thoroughly. All right, just more notes. We're just going to go right to the meat here. All right, session 512, January 27th, 1970 at 9:02 p.m. It was a Tuesday. Now let us return to our new manuscript. Since we have mentioned animals, let me say here that they do possess a kind of consciousness that does not allow them as many freedoms as your own, yet at the same time, they are not hampered in its use by certain characteristics that often impede the practical potential of human consciousness. Consciousness is a way of perceiving the various dimensions of reality. Consciousness is a way of perceiving the various dimensions of reality. Consciousness, as you know it, is highly specialized. The physical senses allow you to perceive the three-dimensional world, and yet by their very nature, they can inhibit the perception of other equally valid dimensions. Most of you identify with your daily physically oriented self. You would not think of identifying with one portion of your body and ignoring all the other parts, and yet you are doing the same thing when you imagine that the egotistical self carries the burden of your identity. I am telling you that you are not a cosmic bag of bones and flesh thrown together through some mixture of chemicals and elements. I am telling you that your consciousness is not some fiery product formed merely accidentally through the inner workings of chemical components. You are not a forsaken offshoot of physical matter, nor is your consciousness meant to vanish like a puff of smoke. Instead, you form the physical body that you know at a deeply unconscious level with great discrimination, miraculous clarity, and intimate unconscious knowledge of each minute cell that composes it. This is not meant symbolically, quite literal, actually. Now, because your conscious mind, as you think of it, is not aware of these activities, you do not identify with this inner portion of yourselves. You prefer to identify with the part of you who watches television or cooks or works, the part of you thinks, knows what it is doing. But this seemingly unconscious portion of yourself is far more knowledgeable, and upon its smooth functioning, your entire physical existence depends. This portion is conscious, aware, alert. It is you, so focused in physical reality. Why do not listen to its voice? Who do not understand that it is the great psychological strength from which your physically oriented self springs? I call this seemingly unconscious the inner ego, for it directs inner activities. It correlates information that is perceived not through the physical senses but through other inner channels. It is the inner perceiver of reality that exists beyond three-dimensional. It carries within the memory of each of your past experiences. It looks into subjective dimensions that are literally infinite, and form these subjective dimensions, all objective realities flow. And from these subjective dimensions, all objective realities flow. Long pause. All necessary information is given to you through these inner channels, and unbelievable inner activities take place before you can so much as lift a finger, flicker an eyelid, or read this sentence upon this page. This portion of your identity is quite natively clairvoyant and telepathic, so that you are warned of disasters before they occur, whether or not you consciously accept the message, and all communication takes place long before a word is spoken. I may pause now and then to give you rest. Basically, I just blew your mind. Why don't you take a minute to absorb and process that information? Wow. That was deep. That was really deep. All right. The outer ego and the inner ego operate together. The one to enable you to manipulate in this world that you know, the other to bring you to delicate inner perceptions without which physical existence could not be maintained. There is, however, a portion of you, the deeper identity, who forms both the inner ego and the outer ego, who decided that you would be a physical being in this plane and in this time, right now, in this day and age, as we perceive time, linear time, which doesn't exist but is necessary for this matrix. This is the core of your identity, the psychic seed from which you sprang, the multidimensional personality of which you are a part. For those of you who wonder where I place the subconscious, as psychologists think of it, you can imagine it as a meeting place, so to speak, between the outer and inner egos. You must understand that there are no real divisions to the self, however, so we speak of various portions only to make the basic idea clear. Since we are addressing individuals who do identify with the normally conscious self, I bring such matters up in the first chapter because I will be using the terms later in the book, and because I want to state the fact of multidimensional personality as soon as possible. Yeah, we're all multidimensional beings, naturally multidimensional beings. that exist in multiple dimensions right now. You cannot understand yourselves, and you cannot accept my independent existence until you rid yourself of the notion that personality is a here and now attribute of consciousness. Now, some of the things that I may say about physical reality in this book may startle you, but remember that I am viewing it from an entirely different standpoint. You are presently focused entirely within, wondering perhaps what else, if anything, there may be outside. I am outside, returning momentarily to a dimension that I know and loved. I am not, in your terms, a resident, however. While I have a psychic passport, there are still some problems of translation, inconveniences of entry that I must contend with. Many people, I hear, have lived for years within New York City and never taken a tour through the Empire State Building, while many foreigners are well acquainted with it. And so, while you have a physical address, I may still be able to point out some very strange and miraculous psychic and psychic and psychological structures within your own system of reality that you have ignored. I hope, quite frankly, to do far more than this. I hope to take you on a tour through levels of reality that are available to you, and to guide you on a journey through the dimensions of your own and to guide you on a journey through the dimensions of your own psychological structure, to open up whole areas of your own consciousness of which you have been relatively unaware. I hope, therefore, not only to explain the multidimensional aspects of personality, but to give each reader some glimpse of that greater identity that is his own. You may take a break. Not yet. All right, there's some notes. Jane had been very tired before the session. She reassumed in the same manner. Okay, this is Seth again. The self that you know is but one fragment of your entire identity. These fragment selves are not strung together, however, like beads of a string. They're more like various skins of an onion or segments of an orange, all connected through one vitality and growing out into various realities while springing from the same source. Interesting. I'm not comparing personality to an orange or an onion, but I want to emphasize that these things grow from within outward. So does each fragment of your entire self. You observe the outside aspect of objects. Your physical senses permit you to perceive the exterior forms to which you then react, but your physical senses, to some extent, force you to perceive reality in this manner, and the inside vitality within matter and form is not so apparent. I can tell you, for example, that there is consciousness even within a nail. But few of my readers will take me seriously enough to stop in mid-sentence and say good morning or good afternoon to the nearest nail they can find stuck in a piece of wood. Nevertheless, the atoms and molecules within the nail do possess their own kind of consciousness. The atoms and molecules that make up the pages within this book are also, within their own level, aware. Nothing exists, neither rock, mineral, plant, animal, or air, that is not filled with consciousness of its own kind. So you stand amid a constant, vital commotion of gestalt, of aware energy. And you are yourselves physically composed of consciousness cells that carry within them the realization of their own identity, that cooperate willingly to form the corporal structure that is your physical body. Man, those words are all chopped up. That was hard to read. Sorry about that. Moving on. I'm saying, of course, that there is no such thing as dead matter. There is no object that was not formed by consciousness, and each consciousness, regardless of its degree, rejoices in sensation and creativity. You cannot understand what you are unless you understand such matters. For convenience sake, you close out the multitudinous inner communications that leap between the tiniest parts of your flesh. Yet, even as physical creatures, you are to some extent a portion of other consciousness. There are no limitations to the self, there are no limitations to its potentials. You can adopt artificial limitations through your own ignorance. However, you can identify, for example, with your outer ego alone and cut yourself off from abilities that you are a part of, or cut yourself off from abilities that are a part of you. You can deny, but you cannot change the facts. Personality is multidimensional. Even though many people hide their heads, figuratively speaking, in the sand of three-dimensional existence and pretend there's nothing more. In this book, I hope to pull some heads out of the sand. You may break or end the session as you prefer. Moving on. They didn't end the session. We will shortly be finished with our chapter 1 with very little more to go. Amused? That is not for the book. I did not mean to underestimate the outer ego. You have simply overestimated it, nor has its true nature been recognized. We will have more to say concerning this point, but for now it is enough to realize that your sense of identity and continuity is not dependent upon the ego. Now, at times I will be using the term camouflage, referring to the physical world to which the outer ego relates. For physical form is one of the camouflages that reality adopts. The camouflage is real, and yet there is a much greater reality within it, the vitality that gave it form. Your physical senses then allow you to perceive this camouflage, for they are attuned to it in a highly specialized manner. But to sense the reality within the form requires a different sort of attention and more delicate manipulations than the physical senses provide. The ego is a jealous god, and it wants its interests served. It wants its interests served. It does not want to admit the reality of any dimensions except those within which it feels comfortable and can understand. It was meant to be an aid, but it has been allowed to become a tyrant. Even so, it is much more resilient and eager to learn than is generally supposed. It is not natively as rigid as it seems. Its curiosity can be of great value. If you have a limited conception of the nature of reality, then your ego will do its best to keep you in the small, enclosed area of your accepted reality. You remember how I used to talk about boxes all the time? You don't put things in boxes. Same thing. Of your accepted reality is within that box that you've built around yourself, around your life, with your false beliefs that keep you in the small enclosed area of your accepted reality. Yeah. If, on the other hand, your intentions and creative instincts are allowed freedom, then they communicate some knowledge of greater dimensions to this most physically oriented portion of your personality. Screw it. We're just going to power through it here, guys. All right. So the end of the session, we're going to start a new session, 5/13, February 5th, 1970 at 9:10 p.m. was a Thursday. Okay, that's not important. Good evening. Good evening, Seth. Now we will continue. All right. So let's back up. I like to bridge these together because he picks up right where he left off. All right, allowed freedom. So if you have a limited conception of the nature of reality, then your ego will do its best to keep you in the small enclosed area of your accepted reality. If, on the other hand, your intuitions and creative instincts are allowed freedom, then they communicate some knowledge of greater dimensions to this most physically oriented portion of your personality. The fact of this book is proof that the ego does not have the whole kettle of personality to itself, for there is no doubt that it is being produced by some other personality than that of the writer, known as Jane. Since Jane Roberts has no abilities that are not inherent in the species as a whole, then at the very least it must be admitted that human personality has many more attributes than those usually ascribed to it. I hope to explain what these abilities are and point out the ways that each individual can use to release these potentials, your powers. Personality is a gestalt of ever-changing perception in this part of the identity which perceives. I do not force my perceptions upon the woman through whom I speak, nor is her consciousness blotted out during our communications. Instead, there is an expansion of her consciousness and a projection of energy that is directed away from three-dimensional reality. This concentration away from the physical system may make it appear as if her consciousness is blotted out. Instead, more is added to it. Now, from my own field of reality, I focus my attention toward the woman, but the words that she speaks, these words upon the pages, are not initially verbal at all. In the first place, language as you know it is a slow affair. Letter by letter strung out to make a word, and words to make a sentence, the result of a linear thought pattern. Language as you know it is partially and grammatically the end product of your physical time sequences. You can only focus upon so many things at one time, and your language structure is not given to the communication of intricate, simultaneous experience. Wow. I am unaware of a different kind of experience, not linear, and can focus upon and react to an infinite variety of simultaneous events. Rupert could not express them, and so they must be leveled out into linear expressions if they are to be communicated. This ability to perceive and react to unlimited simultaneous events is a basic characteristic of each whole self or entity. Therefore, I do not claim it as some feat that is exclusively my own, because we all have that ability. Each reader, being presently ensconced within a physical form, I presume, knows only a small portion of himself. As I mentioned earlier, the entity is the overall identity of which his personality is one manifestation, an independent and eternally valid portion. In these communications, therefore, Rupert's consciousness expands and yet focuses in a different dimension, a dimension between his reality and mine, a field relatively free of distraction. Here I impress certain concepts upon him with his permission and assent. They are not neutral in that all knowledge or information bears the stamp of personality who holds it or passes it on. Rupert makes his verbal knowledge available for our use, and quite automatically the two of us together cause the various words that will be spoken. Distractions can occur as any information can be distorted. We are used to working together now, however, and the distortions are very few because they've been working together for 7 years. Later in the book, spoiler alert, that he's been conditioning her entire life since she was a child to be open for this communication. This was in the 70s after, so this happened in 63 when her first communication happened. I don't know how old she was then. Some of my energy is also projected through Rupert, and his energy and mine both activate his physical form during our sessions. And now, as I speak these sentences, there are many other ramifications that I will discuss later. You may take a break. I am not, therefore, a product of Rupert's subconscious any more than he is a product of my subconscious mind. Nor am I a secondary personality, cleverly trying to undermine a precarious ego. I have seen to it, in fact, that all portions of Rupert's personality are benefited and their integrity maintained and honored. There is within his personality a rather unique facility that makes our communications possible. I will try to put this as simply as possible. There is within his psyche what amounts to a transparent dimensional warp that serves almost like an open window through each other realities can be perceived, through which other realities can be perceived. A multidimensional opening that has to some extent escaped being clouded over by the shade of physical focus. The physical senses usually blind you to those open channels, for they perceive reality only in their own image. To some extent, then, I enter your reality through a psychological warp in your space and time. In a manner of speaking, such an open channel serves much as a pathway between Rupert's personality and my own. So the communication is possible between us. Such psychological and psychic warps between dimensions of existence are not infrequent. They are merely recognized as such infrequently and utilized. Hold on. They are merely recognized as such infrequently and utilized even less so. I will try to give you some idea of my own non-physical existence. Let it serve to remind you that your own basic identity is as non-physical as my own. That is the end of chapter 1. That is the end of 35-minute video. Wow. I had a lot of mistakes. We're gonna fix that up though. Yeah. What do you think about that, man? What was that one? I want to go back real quick. Yeah. So instead, you form the physical body that you know at a deeply unconscious level with great discrimination, miraculous clarity, and intimate unconscious knowledge of each minute cell that composes it. This is not meant symbolically. Everything about us in the physical form down to every little molecule, it's all on its own level of some variety or some kind of consciousness, which is an energy. So imagine how many things are working in concert at a subconscious level that animate us. And we're sitting here trying to make artificial intelligent robots when we are the artificial intelligent robots, biological robots. Man. And the one part is that so many things happen in the body before you even lift a finger. Shutter an eyelid. I mean, that's intense. And the outer ego was there to serve a purpose, but things were manipulated and we were deceived. But they tell you the truth and the lie at the same time. We just always bought the lie. Couldn't see past the lie. I don't know what the hell that was. So now that you're awakened or awakening to the truth, I don't think anything in this physical existence really matters. Everything about this life is meant for the spiritual. You know, we live in in and fight and die defending our senses. You know, we're so drunk on these five senses that we're not even open to the possibility of there being a spiritual realm or another dimension for a majority of people, especially those in organized religion. I mean, organized religion is set up just to give you just enough, but it's there to control you, to keep you as a slave. To keep feeding the system, to keep this physical illusion running. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Jesus, it's almost 10:40. All right, well, I'm going to try to meditate and probably fall asleep like I usually do because just don't get to sleep. Yeah, I really don't sleep ever. It doesn't matter. Anyways, love you guys. Love and light to everybody. Be the change you want to see in the world. Learn to love yourself. If you can't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. I'm going to keep saying it over and over and over again until you figure it out or you love yourself. I forgot to say hit the like button a little late now. Jeez. Hit the like button. Like it. It's right at the bottom of the screen there. Just, thumbs up. Or if you don't like it, put a thumbs down. I don't care. Just hit something. Alright, guys. I love you. I'm getting delirious. And I wanted to read. I want to get up to the point to where we're on the same page here. So I'm only like 12, 15 pages ahead of where we're at together. Okay. I'm rambling because I'm tired. Gotta go to bed. Okay, bye-bye.